Professor Worgles here. We are on lecture number 30. We're moving on to the third example, data retrieval number 3. So you can open up the third directory, and we're going to look at index.html. Now let's figure out how we can solve that issue with the keyword this. We were losing our context, and we were not able to access the name. Now I have the same thing. I have application, and I have the person's name, and I call the start method. So here's the application class. Name is a parameter, and I'm going to set this property. So name is a parameter here and a property here. So this parameter is going to set the property. And then I have a method called start. So I call app.start. It's a function. It's going to create a new advertisement. And I have my retrieve method. Now in the previous example, retrieve just had the function that will be called once the GET request is successful. To fix the problem, we can actually pass in the context of the application class. So I'm calling onDataReceived, which is this function right here, which will display an alert with the name and the data, but I'm also passing in the application object. So I'm passing in the context of the application object. So when I call the retrieve method, if I scroll down, here's the advertisement class, which I'm creating an instance of. I'm calling the retrieve method, which is right here. I'm passing in the onSuccess method, as well as the context of the application class. So that's why I have context here. So this is a rewrite of the retrieve method for the advertisement class. OnSuccess and context are both in the scope. Okay, I'm going to wrap or enclose the onSuccess and context. So you'll see here, doOnSuccess is a function that has data, and I'm going to call the onSuccess method, passing the context and the data. So instead of the jQuery get method calling onSuccess directly, it calls a function defined inside of the retrieval method called doOnSuccess. So that way I can pass in the context of the application class and call a method dynamically. Okay, so you'll see I'm calling onDataReceived. That's onSuccess here. The GET request calls doOnSuccess, which is right here, which then calls the method that we passed as a parameter, which will pass the context of the application class and the data received from the GET request. Okay, so it's almost like that for loop that we looked at a few lectures ago with templates. We were doing templates with the front end. We had a for loop, and we are losing the reference of I. I was passed by a reference instead of by a value. So what I needed to do was enclose that in a function and pass I by value by passing it as a parameter to that function. That's the same here. I'm losing the application context. So I'm going to pass the context. I'm going to enclose the GET request function call with our own function that passes the context as well as the data. So you'll see onDataReceived is called. Therefore, when I call onDataReceived, the this keyword is the context of the application class, and data is going to be from our GET request. Okay, so if we run this, make sure you update the code. Go back, we're in number 3, data retrieval number 3. You'll see, Professor Worgles, you just won $1 million. Okay, so we have access to the name and to the message from the advertisement. So there is a problem when you start getting into dynamic programming. It adds another layer of complexity because you're adding another layer of abstraction. When doing this, you have to be careful when developing because you may run into some logical errors, just like we saw with that for loop, because of the added layer of complexity. However, once you add this layer of abstraction, your development becomes easier. You can have any number of people, have any number of advertisements, and you don't have to change any of the code. So what we say in the industry is the learning curve is steep, so it's difficult to learn to program this way, but once you do, the rest of your development becomes much easier. And that's the way you should be developing when you go into the industry. Try to think of programming in a dynamic way, which may be hard to learn at first, but later it will make your life much easier. So let's go through this and make sure we understand it. We're going to do that in the next video. Stick with Professor Wergeles, and we'll see you in the next video.